The spring of 1945 brought not only the promise of victory, but also the chilling revelation of unspeakable horrors. As American forces pushed deeper into Germany, they uncovered the concentration camps, monuments to human depravity. Amidst the grim task of liberation and justice, a simple yet profoundly effective order emerged. "Show me your hands." This command, seemingly innocuous, became a crucible for female German prisoners, stripping away their defenses and exposing the raw, undeniable truth of their complicity, often reducing them to tears as the weight of their actions became physically manifest. The biting wind of April 1945 whipped across the ravaged German landscape, carrying the stench of war and, increasingly, something far more sinister. Captain John Miller, a seasoned infantry officer from Ohio, felt the grim resolve harden in his gut with every mile his unit, the 3rd Armored Division, advanced. They had seen the bombed-out cities, the desperate civilians, the shattered remnants of the Wehrmacht, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared them for the sight of Buchenwald. The gates, the emaciated figures, the crematoria. It was a vision of hell on earth, a stark, undeniable testament to the depths of Nazi barbarity. Miller, a man who believed in justice and the American way of doing things, direct, pragmatic, and unwavering, found his worldview irrevocably altered. The initial shock gave way to a cold fury, a determination that every single person responsible for this atrocity would be held accountable. His men, many barely out of their teens, stood in stunned silence, their youthful optimism replaced by a profound, sickening understanding of evil. The discovery of such camps, replicated across the Reich, forced the American command to confront not just the military defeat of Germany, but the moral collapse of a nation. It wasn't enough to capture soldiers. They had to identify and prosecute the architects and enforcers of this genocide. Intelligence reports, often dismissed as propaganda before, now painted a horrifyingly accurate picture. The sheer scale of the operation, the meticulous record-keeping of death, pointed to a vast network of complicity extending far beyond the SS. As American forces liberated camp after camp, they encountered not only the victims, but also the local populations, many of whom claimed ignorance or fear. Yet the evidence suggested otherwise. The logistical nightmare of running these death factories, the transportation of millions, the daily operations, it required widespread participation. The question arose, how to identify those who actively participated, especially among the civilian population, including women, who often served in administrative roles, as guards, or even as willing collaborators in the surrounding towns. The conventional methods of interrogation were often met with denial. People would claim they were forced, they didn't know, they were just following orders. But the physical evidence, the silent testimony of their hands, began to emerge as a powerful, undeniable tool. It was in this context, born from the pragmatic need to differentiate between victims, bystanders, and perpetrators, that the order, "Show me your hands," began to circulate among the American units, tasked with securing these liberated areas and processing the local populace. It was a simple command, yet its implications would prove devastatingly effective in uncovering the truth. The American military, driven by a fierce commitment to justice and a pragmatic approach to problem-solving, understood that sometimes the most profound truths were revealed not through words, but through the silent, undeniable marks left by one's actions. This order, initially a practical measure, quickly evolved into a powerful psychological weapon designed to strip away the layers of denial and expose the raw truth of complicity. The stage was set for a confrontation not just with the enemy, but with the very nature of human evil. The makeshift processing center, a converted schoolhouse in the recently secured town of Nordhausen, buzzed with a tense energy. It was late April, and the air still carried the acrid scent of burnt timber from recent skirmishes. Captain Miller watched as a line of German women, ranging from young adults to the elderly, shuffled forward. They had been rounded up from the surrounding villages, some suspected of direct involvement with the nearby Dora Mittelbau concentration camp, others simply for proximity and the need for thorough screening. Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-witted interpreter from Boston with a background in psychology, stood beside Miller, her face a mask of grim determination. "Next!" she called out in crisp German. A woman in her late 30s, Frau Schmidt, stepped forward, her eyes darting nervously. She wore a simple, if worn, dress and clutched a small handbag. "Your name?" Jenkins asked. "Elsa Schmidt," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Occupation? Housewife. My husband was a soldier." Jenkins nodded, then delivered the command that had become a chilling mantra. "Show me your hands, Frau Schmidt." The woman hesitated, her eyes widening. She slowly extended her hands, palms up. Miller leaned closer, his gaze fixed. Her hands were not the soft, unblemished hands of a typical housewife. The palms were calloused, the skin rough and thickened, particularly around the knuckles and fingertips. There were faint but discernible scars on her forearms, consistent with minor abrasions from heavy labor or handling rough materials. Her fingernails were short, almost bitten, and ingrained with a stubborn grime that even vigorous scrubbing couldn't entirely remove. These were the hands of someone who had performed strenuous, repetitive manual tasks, not the delicate work of a domestic sphere. Jenkins, observing Miller's silent assessment, translated his unspoken conclusion. "These are not the hands of a housewife, Frau Schmidt. These are the hands of someone who has worked with tools, perhaps handled heavy objects, or performed duties requiring significant physical exertion." The color drained from Frau Schmidt's face. Her initial defiance crumbled. Her eyes welled up, and a single tear traced a path down her dust-streaked cheek. The physical evidence, undeniable and stark, had bypassed her carefully constructed narrative of innocence. She began to sob, a quiet, broken sound that echoed in the tense room. This scene was repeated dozens of times. A woman claiming to be a seamstress revealed hands with deep, ingrained dirt under the nails and hardened skin on the palms, not from fine needlework, but from shoveling. Another, who insisted she was a schoolteacher, displayed hands with telltale abrasions and a peculiar discoloration, consistent with handling harsh chemicals or rough materials, not chalk and books. The American soldiers, initially skeptical of such a simple method, quickly became grimly convinced. The hands told a story that words could not deny. They spoke of forced marches, of beatings, of the grim daily tasks of maintaining a death camp. They spoke of complicity, of active participation in the machinery of destruction. For many of these women, the command to "show me your hands" was the moment their carefully constructed facade of ignorance or victimhood shattered. It was the moment the physical evidence of their actions, etched into their very flesh, confronted them with the undeniable truth. The tears that followed were not always tears of remorse, but often of a profound, desperate realization that their lies had been exposed, and their fate, now inextricably linked to the horrors they had helped perpetrate, was sealed. The pragmatic American approach had found a way to cut through the fog of denial, revealing the stark reality of guilt. The psychological breakdown following the "show me your hands" order was often swift and profound. In the interrogation rooms of Nordhausen, the air grew heavy with the scent of fear and stale cigarette smoke. Captain Miller, observing from behind a one-way mirror, watched as Lieutenant Jenkins, with her calm yet unyielding demeanor, pressed the women whose hands had betrayed them. Frau Schmidt, her initial sobs having subsided into a quiet, desperate sniffle, now faced a barrage of questions. "Your hands tell us you were not merely a housewife, Frau Schmidt," Jenkins stated, her voice devoid of accusation, yet firm. "They tell us you performed heavy labor. We have testimonies from survivors of Dora Mittelbau. They speak of female guards, of women who assisted in the administration, who oversaw forced labor details. What was your role?" Frau Schmidt initially clung to her denials, her voice hoarse. I worked in the kitchen sometimes, just cooking for the guards. But Jenkins, armed with the physical evidence and the growing pile of survivor testimonies, pressed on. The kitchen staff did not typically have such calloused hands, Frau Schmidt, nor did they oversee the unloading of supplies from the trains or the sorting of prisoners' belongings. We have witnesses who describe a woman matching your description, with distinctive scars on her left forearm, supervising the selection process at the railhead. The mention of the scars, a detail only visible upon close inspection of her hands, was the final blow. Frau Schmidt's composure fractured completely. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. The weight of accountability, amplified by the undeniable physical proof, crushed her. She began to confess, haltingly at first, then in a torrent of desperate words, detailing her role as an auxiliary guard, her duties overseeing female prisoners in the munitions factory, the occasional beatings she administered to maintain order, the chilling indifference with which she witnessed atrocities. Her confession, like many others, painted a grim picture of complicity, not always born of fervent ideology, but often of opportunism, fear, and a chilling normalization of evil. Of the 300 women initially detained and subjected to the "Show Me Your Hands" protocol in the Nordhausen sector, nearly 70% exhibited clear physical evidence of complicity through their hands. Of these, over 85% eventually broke down during interrogation, providing detailed testimonies that corroborated survivor accounts and intelligence reports. The American approach was not about vengeance, but about justice. Miller understood that the confessions, however painful, were crucial for establishing a factual record, for ensuring that the world understood the full scope of the crimes committed. The psychological impact on the prisoners was immense. The order had stripped away their ability to hide behind words, forcing them to confront the physical manifestation of their guilt. It was a stark reminder that actions leave indelible marks, not just on victims, but on the perpetrators themselves. The tears shed were often not of true remorse, but of the crushing realization that their carefully constructed lies had been exposed, and that the long arm of justice, guided by pragmatic American determination, was finally reaching for them. The process was grueling, but it was essential for laying the groundwork for the post-war trials, ensuring that those who participated in the Holocaust, regardless of their gender or perceived status, would face the consequences of their choices. The legacy of the "Show Me Your Hands" order extended far beyond the immediate aftermath of liberation, profoundly shaping the understanding of complicity and justice in the post-war era. The detailed records compiled by Captain Miller's unit and others, including the physical evidence from the prisoners' hands and their subsequent confessions, provided invaluable data for the Nuremberg trials and countless subsequent proceedings. These cases, though often less publicized than those of the high-ranking Nazi officials, were crucial in demonstrating the widespread nature of participation in the Third Reich's atrocities. They revealed that the machinery of genocide was not solely operated by fanatical SS men, but by a vast network of individuals, including women who, through their actions, enabled and perpetuated the horror. Years later, Captain Miller, now a history professor at a Midwestern university, often reflected on those grim days. He would share anecdotes with his students, emphasizing the pragmatic ingenuity of the "Show Me Your Hands" protocol. It wasn't about being cruel, he'd explain. It was about finding the truth when people were determined to hide it. It was about justice, pure and simple. We believed in due process, even for the most heinous criminals, but we also believed in holding people accountable for their actions. The transformation in understanding about complicity was profound. The world grappled with the concept of the banality of evil, recognizing that ordinary people, driven by fear, ambition, or simply a chilling indifference, could become cogs in a genocidal machine. The cases of women like Frau Schmidt, whose hands bore the undeniable marks of their participation, shattered the myth that women were inherently less capable of cruelty or less involved in the regime's crimes. This realization underscored the critical importance of vigilance against all forms of tyranny and the dangers of unchecked power, regardless of who wields it. The lasting lessons from this period, championed by American ideals of justice and human rights, became foundational for international law and the establishment of institutions like the United Nations. The determination to prevent future atrocities, to ensure that never again was more than just a slogan, was deeply rooted in the experiences of those who liberated the camps and confronted the perpetrators. Miller, with his enduring American optimism, believed that while evil could manifest in terrifying ways, the human spirit, when guided by principles of justice and accountability, could always strive for a better future. The "Show me your hands" order, a simple command born of necessity, became a powerful symbol of truth revealed, a testament to the fact that even the most carefully concealed guilt can be brought to light, and that justice, however arduous the path, will ultimately prevail. It was a stark reminder that the choices we make leave indelible marks, and that accountability is an inescapable consequence of human action. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on the moral complexities of wartime justice, and share this video to spark important conversations about accountability and human resilience. Your engagement helps us bring these crucial stories to a wider audience.